Welcome to this time-lapse video of painting a mountain bluebird in pastel. I've applied a shade of light blue to the background sky area, and I blended it with some isopropyl alcohol to create a solid base for the background sky. I like to have a solid base for my sky background so that as I add trees to the foreground, I don't have to cut in areas of sky into my foliage. I'm using a very dark greenish blue to block in a pine tree in the background. And I'm using the isopropyl alcohol to quickly dissolve the color and create a solid base for the trees. I'll block in some tree trunks and branches, and then I can come back and add some more blue pastel to my skyline. I'll blend the sky with my sponge tip applicators, and I'm able to blend close to the tree line without losing the details of my pine tree. Now I can add a lighter shade of green to begin building the tree branches and pine texture in the trees. I am working from the darkest values to the lighter shades of green to create the fullness inside the tree. I'm using my sponge applicator to blend some of the darker values within the tree, and I'm being very careful not to overwork it or remove the lighter shades of the outer branches. I did speed up the time lapse for the background, but I will slow it down a little bit as we begin to develop the mountain bluebird. Next, I will add another pine tree here in the corner and finish developing the background area before moving on to the foreground tall grasses. One advantage of having an alcohol underpainting is that it dries very quickly, and within minutes I'm able to go over it and apply more dry pastel. I'm using an olive green to add the lighter shades in the pine tree, and I'm blending it a little bit and coming back with lighter shades to add highlights and branch texture. Now that the trees have been placed, I'm adding some white clouds to the background. I'm switching to a slate blue to darken the sky at the horizon line. I want to add a blurry effect of trees in the background, which will bring more depth to the painting. The next step is to create the foreground grasses by starting with an orange underpainting process. Next, I will use some green pastel to begin developing the grassy areas. I'll use a small piece of pipe foam to blend some of this grassy area. I want some of the orange color to show through to help bring out some of the autumn colors. Before I finish the background grasses, I want to draw in the legs and feet of the bird and use a little bit of alcohol to solidify them into the paper. Now I can begin adding individual strokes of the tall grasses. I've zoomed up here to begin working on the mountain bluebird. I'm using a medium shade of blue to begin developing a base layer to build my pastels over. I've switched to a lighter shade of blue for the underside of the bird's belly. I will use my sponge-tipped applicator to blend these colors into the paper. I am using Uart 600 grit sanded paper for this demonstration. It will need a few layers of colors to begin giving a smoother appearance. I'm going to draw in the beak with my black pastel, and I am switching to my alcohol to blend the color and solidify the black into the paper. I will use my dark blue to begin developing the darkest values in the bird's body. I'm going to begin contouring and shaping the bird's feathers with this ultramarine blue. I'm using light blue and light gray to shade the bird's beak. There are some very light small feathers around the bottom area of the bird's eye, and I'll use my dark blue beneath this light band of feathers to shade a darker value. I'll use my black to block in the bird's eye, and I will switch to a blue color to add some highlight to the eye's reflection. There are a couple of empty spaces around the bird's head and beak, so I'm using my green to fill this area in to define the bird better. It takes several layers to develop the bird's feathers and color, so I'm adding some darker blue and some highlights to bring out the bird's color with greater color saturation. I'm going to use this very bright ultramarine blue to build his color. I want the shade of blue to be a little bit darker, a little bit richer, because once I begin adding the small downy feathers, I will be using a shade of light blue that will naturally make the entire area a little bit of a shade lighter. I'm using light gray to create some of the small tufts of feathers in his head. I've added some light turquoise to his face feathers, and it gives it a nice luminescent feel. I'm using a paper blending stump to blend my colors together, and it works very well for the first few layers of color. The color being cast in the shadows is a blue shade and not a black. I will add a few guidelines and then add a shade of blue to the wings and tail feathers before I add the individual black lines that separate the individual feathers and the wings. I'm switching to a pastel that has a taupe color with a little bit of a very soft violet in the color. I don't know the name of this particular color, but it works well in the belly area of the bird as I reference the colors in the photo. I've added some gray and white to the area where the sunlight is casting on the side of the bird. I'm using a very light blue to begin creating some of the downy feathers on the bird's belly side. After completing the blue shading in the wings and tail feathers, use a very sharp pointed pencil to draw the flat feathers that are layered upon each other. Complete his wing area with some more blue and blend with a sponge applicator. And gradually add the subtle shapes of the fine feathers in its wings. The wing still needs another layer of blue, and rub it in with your finger or applicator to give it a smooth appearance. I'm using some dark blue to create some of the feather texture. I'm accentuating some of the shadows created from the wings to give it a little bit more realism. Use the light blue to create more of the soft downy feathers built up underneath the belly area of the bird and along the head and back area of his body. This also brings a little bit of fullness to the bird's body and contours his rounded body shape. There are several overlapping feathers in the shoulder area of his wing. I'm going to use this dark blue to add some of those details. I'm going to add a few highlights with my white pastel, and then I'm going to move on and develop the stump post that the bird is sitting on. I'm starting out with a dark gray and then a medium gray to create a base layer of the post. I'm going to use a very dark gray to create the shadowed area beneath the bird's body. And I am blending it with a wet brush to solidify the color. I also want to touch up the grass along the back side of the post. Once the alcohol is dry, I can begin adding some of the shadowed areas and cracks appearing inside the post. I'm going to use a light gray to create some of the light reflections on the post. I've also darkened some of the cracks, and I'm using white pastel along the very edges of the crack where the lights are reflecting from it. I am going to use the sharp edge of my pastel stick to create some taller grasses with the copper color. It's good to step back when your painting is nearly done and decide what areas might need a little more darker value or highlights to add the final touches to a painting. I find that even after a day or so, I do come back and make minor modifications to my painting before I actually frame it. I'm going to sharpen the details in the bird's feet and also add some shadows underneath the toes of the bird. So this completes my demonstration on painting a mountain bluebird in pastels. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and please press like, and I'd love to hear from you, and you can leave a comment below. I really appreciate your support and hope that you subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you join me next time for a new lesson in soft pastel. Thank you and have a wonderful day.